and welcome to another episode of Honest or Malt with myself, Duncan Donuts. I actually did have a raspberry number today with a bit of sugar on it, lovely jubbly, and no Mike this week. He is, ain't no sunshine without pain. He's in a world of trouble right now. So rest up, get better. And this week we've got a special guest, Matt Bailey from SMWYes. He's the Managing Director of Europe and a whole bunch of other places around the world. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you, Duncan. I really appreciate you having me on. And I hope everyone's backs are getting better. I hope everyone's on the mend.
I think he's got a bit of fever, you know, like when you've got young kids and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
They snipe you. Have you got any, did you have kids or?
No, I don't. And but all my friends who do have just got, I constantly have flus and colds.
Yeah, they're not making it up as well. You think not. They're laying it on thick. They're not. As soon as they go into nursery or school, there's just all this stuff that you get that you haven't had in years, all these bugs that go around. And you thought you were really tough, and it's the real level. Like everybody just ends up in bed on the sofa, out for days, and it's just virus after virus.
You can't win.
Yeah,
no.
You can't win.
No,
yeah, you can't win. So today's episode is going to be called SMWYes, featuring Matt Bailey. So you like that, right?
I did actually. I've not heard that one before. I've heard so many different versions of SMWYes. Of course, the main one being the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, for those who are less familiar with the acronym. But SMWYes also works really well. So that's good. I can stick with that one.
Okay, that's good.
Okay, great.
Nice to hear. Well, thanks so much for coming on to the podcast today. Much appreciated. Would you like to just do a bit of an introduction for yourself? Because I understand you've moved over from Australia, you've moved to Scotland. So what's going on? What's your new role at the moment at the Scotch Malt Whisky Society? And what does that mean for all of us club members? Because full disclosure, both myself and Mike are club members.
Do you want the I'll give you the condensed version of the life story. I was in the music industry for some years, and I absolutely just fell out of love with it, is the best way to put it. I just sort of went, this is not my thing. I was working music licensing, music publishing, and artist management sort of side of things with a big company that many people will know. But it was I just sort of lost my passion for it, and it was really I was hosting these mini tastings of whiskey on Friday afternoons in the office at the music publishing company, and me talking about the differences between, say, Irish, American, and Scottish whiskey in an informal setting with tumblers from bottles sitting under my desk all week was the most exciting part of my week.
Yeah, the best bit of the week.
And so when the best part of your week is a whiskey tasting at the end of your week, you know you're not enjoying your job very much. And so I ended up working at – I sort of got chatting to the guys downstairs from where I was working, and there was a Vintage Cellars. For those who are Australian will remember Vintage Cellars. I think they're killing it off now though. Which was this sort of boutique little bottle shop in the city. This is living in Sydney at the time, actually, in Australia. And I went downstairs and I said, we're talking to the guys downstairs in this bottle shop about whiskey and my passion for it, and I was interested in it. And they said to me, "Oh, you seem to know seem to know a thing or two about whiskey. So do you want to work? Do you want a job here selling whiskey?" And I went, "Oh, sure. What's the pay out of interest?" And they said, they gave me a number, and it was exactly half of what I was earning upstairs.
Yeah, I think I've heard that before. Like the money is not the best, right?
No, but at the time it wasn't. I mean, it was half of what I was earning upstairs, and I just sort of went, yeah, okay, I'll take it.
Yeah.
So fast forward.
When people initially transition anyway, you know.
Exactly. But look, that was the whole thing. I said, I'd rather be on the bottom rung of a ladder I want to climb rather than halfway up one I hate. And people say, "Oh, follow your passion," and other people say, "Never follow your passion." And whatever the rule of thumb is for your life and your career, I just sort of went, "Okay, I'd rather be here." And so I just did it. I then started my own whiskey business. I then did some work doing private and corporate tastings, and I bounced around a few different whiskey companies. And then it wasn't until around 2015 that I got a message from a colleague and friend of mine, Andrew Durbidge, who said to me, we're looking for an ambassador for the SMWYes in Australia. And I sort of ignored his email. I went, "Oh, that's beyond me. That's years ahead in the future, that kind of role."
Fake it till you make it. That's what they always say, isn't it?
So I kind of just, that's kind of true, isn't it? And then I took a job with SMWYes, which I started in August, September, somewhere around there in 2015. So fast forward 9 years, I've now been SMWS for about 9 years and a bit. For the last 9 years, I've been looking after SMWS in Australia, so Scottish Malt Whisky Society Australia branch. Very proud of SMWS Australia and where we've taken that branch and that club, because we started off with about probably I think 500 or 600 members at one point, and then when I left, it was closer to 18 or 1900 or something like that.
Yeah, so that's really grown.
It's grown really well, and it's got a great team there now. And a special shout out to Susie, Danelle, Adam, Lockie, and Andrew, and the whole team over there just in what they've built. But recently, in the last 5 weeks, I've now moved to Scotland. It's true. I've moved to Edinburgh, and I am looking after Europe and the rest of basically not Asia and not the US. But if you add up everything else,
everything. I was thinking about you're a man for whom water drains both clockwise and counterclockwise. You experience all the different directions of water drainage.
It's like a cyclone.
In your role.
It's like a cyclone, Duncan. I'm both sides. I'm just tearing.
You don't know if you're going forwards or backwards. Yeah,
exactly.
But that's good. You've got a big region, lots of interesting countries. You mentioned South Africa as well, Australia, Europe. So lots of countries that are really passionate about whiskey. So that's great.
Bada bing, bada boom, Mr. Worldwide as I step in the room.
We always do what's been in your glass and what's been up your ass. What has been in your glass this last few days, and what's been bugging you, man?
You know what? I'll tell you what's in my glass. I showed this to you just before. This is 135.57, the old train carriage. I'm just going to pour a wee bit more into my glass here for our chat. It's one of 218 bottles, an oily and coastal 8-year-old from. I think I can say the name. It's from Loch Lomond Distillery.
135,
135, yep. And only the 57th cask we've ever bottled from 135. And it's an 8-year-old, but it's slightly oily, coastal, peated kind of whiskey. So just to talk about what's in my glass and what I've been enjoying of late is peated whiskey, or at least very lightly peated whiskey, but from distilleries that you wouldn't expect to taste peated whiskey from, if that makes sense. Well, I mean, like when you get to taste something like a peated Glenmurray or a...
Ooh, peated Glenmurray's good.
I know, things like that. Or you often see a lot of Loch Lomond that's unpeated, but, or I should say, distilleries that have that oily and coastal style of whiskey that's not necessarily big, damp, mossy, boggy peat.
I feel like I'm jumping ahead here, but like oily and coastal is one of my favourite categories from the Scottish Malt Whisky Society.
Yes.
It's the one that I always kind of look for, right?
Yep.
And so it's good to see, a more of a variety of note codes, distilleries like under that kind of like banner. I think that's one of the ones that usually hits the mark. There's often Highland Parks, or there's like Glen Scotia's. Now you've got Ardnamurchan in that category, and you've just mentioned a lot of Lomond, which is great.
Right? By the way, Ardnamurchan, unpeated Ardnamurchan is just a gift of the gods. That is some of the best spirit out there right now. There's so much good whiskey coming out of Scotland, and even out of the newer distilleries. I know I'm going off tangent here, but
no, go for it. Yeah, go for it.
I get so excited about what this new realm of distilling looks like around the world, and how a lot of distilleries now are sort of taking a different approach with their build and their stills and their spirit style and their yeast strains and their cask types and all the stuff that they're actually really playing around with a bit, and sometimes it really works and sometimes it doesn't. But when it does, you end up with these whiskies that are like unpeated Ardnamurchan, that it's just like that. It's viscous, it's thick, it's oily, it's charismatic. Just the other night, I was at Queen Street, one of our venues, and I saw a bottle of 149.3, which was a 6-year-old unpeated Ardnamurchan. And you go, yeah, okay, fine, I'll definitely get a dram of that. And it was unbelievable.
On the unpeated thing, when they're coastal, in literally the last episode,
that's what I mean.
We were banging on about, we tried all these whiskies over a weekend in Glasgow, and one of the ones that I remembered most was... Did you go to the
festival?
Yeah, we went to the festival. We also stayed for like 4 days, and so we went to like I call it Le Pot Still now, because it's the Bonaccord. It feels like they should both be French. Like, Glasgow in France, right? So
Le Pot Still.
Le Pot Still. So otherwise it's not fair. It's not fair on the Pot Still. It can't be. It's Le Pot Still. and the Born Accord. So one of the whiskies that stood out to us the most, you're talking about unpeated, was an unpeated Kalila 11-year-old. And I know it's Diageo, and it's like, but oh my days, incredible sort of early 50% ABV, 11-year unpeated special edition. It's about 95, 100 pounds. But I couldn't get it out of my head. It's living in my head rent-free until I buy a bottle now. Like, it's that good.
Do you remember a few years ago those Diageo core range released a 14 or 15-year-old Stitchell Reserve, those unpeated Kalilas from like 5 years ago? They were unbelievable whiskies. And unfortunately, you these days are probably fetching a silly numerical amount. Silly money on auction site somewhere. But I mean, they were, every so often you do see unpeated Kalila, and that stuff is again just wonderful spirit. Yeah. I'll never bash Diageo. I know there's this trend. It's a tall poppy syndrome. I think it's Australia is very good at it. Which is, like where, you got to bash.
It's just called jumping on the bandwagon, isn't it?
Yeah, you got to bash the big guys because it's like, no, you don't. They just make great whiskey. So
David versus Goliath. I mean, they're still Guinness, aren't they? Guinness Zero. They do loads of stuff. So what's been in your glass is some unpeated Ardnamurchan, right?
Yep. And some Loch Lomond tonight as well.
Loch Lomond.
Yeah.
Very nice. Very nice. And you're big fan of the oily and coastal category as well, it sounds like.
Big fan of a good ex-bourbon cask and a oily and coastal profile. That's where it's at. I love my big sherried whiskies as well. You've got to be a time and place for everything. But which one have you got? Which one have you got there? You showed me some society bottles earlier.
Well, you're like turning my head here, Matt, because I currently poured a Manamore, which was the viscous velvet.
Yep.
But we were talking about Ardnamurchan, and one of the ones that I loved, one of the first Ardnamurchans, I think, not the first, but one of the early ones that SMWYes released was called Fire Festival.
Oh, yes.
Maybe it was a batch, and oh my days, it was just, there was so much stuff going on in it. It was incredible, but that was a peated one. But I've also got salted cinnamon butter, which is a Bunnahabhain, which I think is oily and coastal. It's an first fill ex-bourbon barrel. And
that'll be amazing. That'll be amazing.
Yeah, it is genuinely amazing.
Yeah.
I wish I got a second bottle. That's my mistake. And also, I'm a big fan of the American bourbons that SMWYes do, which I think are actually really good value often, especially if they're on a bit of a cheeky offer.
Yeah.
So whenever I see them on offer, I pick them up. And they can be down a sort of 45, 50 quid for single cask, incredible one. This one's called Coconuts.
We'll keep an eye. If you like buying them on promo, keep an eye on your inbox next week. Then that's all I'm going to say.
Oh yeah, we'll probably be around when this comes out. Then in that case, so obviously we're in the Black Friday period at the moment. I've also got a bottle of Surf Sea and Shore open at Glen Scotia, which again is oily and coastal. So I think 2 of the 4 I've got open at oily and coastal, which just goes to show.
Yeah.
So has anything been on your wick? Has anything been annoying you in this last week?
Or as you said, up my
we
arse.
Say up your ass. We say up your ass. Yeah.
Okay, in general, not this past week. I mean, this past week's been really good actually. I just met with our French team today, and we've got a great team working on the Europe team and a great team in venues, and we've got a new venue manager starting this week with the Vaults, and nothing professionally has been up my ass. But you know what? I will tell you though, there's
That's good to hear.
Yeah, it's a good week. It's only Monday. But look,
to be fair, yeah.
Yeah, to be fair, it's Monday. But I'll tell you something that does bother me. There's 2 things that bother me. Actually, you know what? I'll actually, just a bit of context. I used to do this.
Oh, you're giving it, that means you're already worried. If you're giving it context, you're already worried. They're going to give you context before you go into it. Okay, go on.
I used to do, especially throughout COVID and all those years, I used to do a daily live stream. I'd do a live stream every single night at 7 p.m.
Right.
And Monday was reserved for what was called the Bailey Rant, the hashtag Bailey Rant. And people looked forward to the Monday night live stream because it was where I'd go on a rant about something to do in the whiskey scene. But what I will touch on is, first of all, at the moment at the Society, we are releasing some of the most incredible sherried whiskies I think we've ever seen in history ever. Because rewind 5, 6, 7 years ago, and we saw this sort of demand for sherried whiskies really increasing. And everyone wants a good sherried whiskey. And then the other day I was reading a review of we'd had a whole outturn of sherried whiskies 2 weeks ago where every release was a sherry release. So it was like 16 new casks.
Yeah.
And every single one was sherried. And in some respects, some were full maturation, some were additional maturation, some were young, some were old, all sorts of things from wide range of peated and unpeated distilleries, mostly Scottish, a little bit elsewhere. And you go, okay, cool. And then you read this one review. It's always just that one review, isn't it? And someone goes,
I bet I could guess what review it is. Listen, I'm not going to say, but I bet I could guess. I bet I could guess.
I bet you could. But it was one review where it was, they were sort of like, it'd be good to, too many sherried whiskies. It would be good to see some ex-bourbon whiskies.
You can't win.
You can't win.
And I have I support that. I have read online people going, there's not enough good sherried stuff coming out. And it's like, you're right, there's more sherried stuff coming out now. And not just like 6-month finishes, like 3, 4, 5-year finishes.
Oh, yeah.
As well as full maturations. One of the favourite bottles I've had in recent SMWYes history was a Glenlivet, which was called Raisin Toffee Jam. And it was a full maturation Glenlivet, I think about 16 years old or something like that. I was so happy to get hold of the bottle.
Unreal.
It was unreal. Genuinely incredible.
I had one of our 10s, talking Bunnahabhain, I had a recent one, which was, I think it was Australia Market got this, and it was a 12-year-old, but it was 5 years ex-bourbon, 7 years ex-sherry.
Right.
So the additional maturation was longer than the initial
it was like
maturation.
a cherry refill for 7 years, yeah.
Yeah, and it was just phenomenal whiskey. It was like an unpeated, sherried Bunnahabhain. Anyway, but so that was my first gripe. My second one is my pro tip to everyone getting into whiskey. If you're listening to this and you're sort of somewhere early or medium way through your whiskey journey, and I don't want to get in trouble for saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Don't read whiskey-based reviews or scores. There you go. You know what? I just this whole trend towards I was going to buy a bottle of that, but it only got an 86.25 on Whiskey Base.
Yeah.
So what does it need to get? An 86.35 or an 86.75 or 88 or something or 87? And these numbers, these arbitrary numbers that people attach to the quality of a whiskey, which you go, that hasn't, all it takes is 3 reviews or something. 3 people rate it, and therefore the average is, that average is what 3 people think of that whiskey, not.
Yeah, you can see that, but I tend to go off not the score, but off the tasting notes that people get, and I try to look for tasting notes that I'm after.
Yeah, tasting notes are really helpful, but the score doesn't tell you anything. The score, I've had whiskies where the average score was 65 on there that have been actually very good, and then I've had whiskies on there that are averaging 96.25. And you go, oh, that's a bit underwhelming. I
think the only bottle I can think of in the last few years that's really truly offended me was a Kilkerran. I think it was port cask or something. Yeah, it was because they often have a lot of kind of tobacco in them, but it basically just tasted like I was drinking it out of a recently used ashtray, right? And it was just too much for me. And that's the only one where I've really thought, I can pick that up from any of the reviews. Everyone said it was wonderful, and it just wasn't my cup of tea. And I was mentioning about that Glenlivet earlier, and I've had in the last 3 years at least 10 single cask Glenlivets. The SMWYes one was the best one, and I will die on that hill, right? I will literally die on that hill. It was the best one by some margin, right? So that's how good stuff could be when it's full maturation. But with whiskey scores, I think I put a post on Blue Sky recently, because Blue Sky's taken off now. I don't know if you've seen that. Everyone's gone mad for it, right? Yeah. And someone said, are you going to leave Twitter? And I was like, no, because I want to hear what both the left and the right of the whiskey world are thinking. So you've got all the progressive people have gone onto Blue Sky, all the hippies and the liberals, and you still got the right-wing people hanging around on Twitter talking about whiskey. Anyway, it's not exactly like that, but it's a bit like that. So anyway, I'm on both because I'm just there for the whiskey.
I've never heard of whiskey Twitter being left or right.
Well, it isn't, but the people have mostly left Twitter or X because they disagree with certain things. It's a shame because at the moment what you're seeing is a lot of double posting. People posting the same thing on Blue Sky as they post on Twitter. So it's just seems like a lot of effort for people really. But it's definitely split now. There's a divide, and I think I posted something saying whether you score your whiskey out of 1 to 5, 1 to 10, 50 to 100. Let's all just, let's all just keep it happy and keep it nice, people. Do you believe in blind scoring out of 5?
Yeah, I quite like blind tastings. In fact, for years we've been running the Australian Malt Whisky Tasting Championship, which is the biggest blind tasting championship you could ever ask for in the world. We get 250 people come into that every year. I'm a huge fan of blind whiskey tasting. I love it. And it's so rare that I get the opportunity to actually do it, because all too often I've been involved in setting them up.
Yeah.
And so you go,
Yeah.
But I do love a blind whiskey tasting, because you get to, it's true analysis. Do you know what's that? There's a retailer in the US, SMWYes.
I've heard of them.
Yeah, they're one of the big sort of whiskey retailers in the US. And I've never been to the KL1s, but they've got years ago they ran this tasting. It was a Bamor tasting. You're going to love this. They did a Bamor, you can search it up. They did a Bamor tasting where they put 5 different Bamors in front of each person, and all that people knew was the distillery. They didn't know which expressions of what they were tasting. And like the first whiskey was like, Bamor 10 or something, or Bamor 12-year-old. And the second whiskey was Bamor 18 with all the colouring added and all the 40% ABV sort of thing. The third whiskey was the 1964 Black Bamor that these days goes for £50,000 a bottle.
Yeah.
And then the fourth whiskey was some 6-year-old indie bottling of a Bamor or something, and then the fifth one was something else. But the fact was that the middle one, the Black Bamor, scored actually I think second last.
Yeah,
in the lineup, and everyone's like, "Oh, it's too a bit long in the tooth, a bit too long in that sherry cask. It's a bit cloying, a bit too tannic." And the comments,
if you told them it was 50 grand and poured it for them, they would have scored it like 10 out of 10.
And I'm really conscious of what I call purchaser bias in whiskey.
Yeah,
that if you've just spent even £100, or even I'd say even as low as whatever £50 on a bottle. You've definitely got what's called, purchaser bias. You will like that whiskey because you've purchased it.
Wow, it's very nice.
For instance, I'm a huge fan of young whiskies. Like I'm drinking an 8-year-old Loch Lomond right now.
Yep.
I've referenced already tonight, 6-year-old Bamor and 7-year-old Bunnahabhains and things that you go, you know what? There's and 6-year-old Ardney Mercantory, but just great whiskies that are very spirit driven, and that don't need you like this whole sort of. It's funny, like a 10-year-old whiskey will sell twice as well as a 9-year-old whiskey, because it's that perception of it being it's finally hit a 10-year-old age statement. Oh, it's a bit older.
It's a mental thing, isn't it? Right?
I think it's. I'm going to blame. A decade of 90s Scotch whiskey marketing.
I mean, look, it's not a mental thing for me, but I think for people that are getting into whiskey, or people who don't try a lot of whiskey, just try some, then they're like, well, it's 10 years. It's got to be better, hasn't it? But
the 18-year-old has to be better than the 10-year-old, and the 25. These are arbitrary age statements. The 25-year-old must be the best one.
Yeah, absolutely. So I love the story about Bamor. That was great, especially like. The 1964 50 grand whiskey scoring second from last. Love that. I'll tell you a wee anecdote after the pod, because we've already told it before. Share with you later on.
Okay, please do.
Yeah, I really will. I've had a pretty zen week. The best thing I tried was a Ben Nevis 1996. I like Ben Nevis from the sort of 90s. And I'm still drinking a Ferdandel one, which is like a sort of dirty sherry refill. And as I'm going through the bottle, it's got all those kind of sherry notes, and it's super fruity, but it has the oiliness there, but it carries this kind of like dirty note to it. And I'm loving that. And again, one of those ones, I think I have got a second bottle of it, so happy days, so I can finish this one off. And I cracked another bottle of Redbreast Quattro Brules. I don't care. It's the smoothest whiskey known to man. It is so easy sipping. It's just fruity, spicy, nutty, and just ultra smooth. And I had to go out making some Irish coffees the other day because we're getting towards Christmas now, and I really messed it up. When you're trying to put the cream on the back of the spoon? Yeah, it just completely duffed it up. I think single cream just didn't work. I don't know. Like,
I don't make Irish coffees, but I definitely order them when I'm at bars.
I wanted. What's been annoying me is I wanted it when you get the cream sat on top perfectly.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't. I couldn't get it right that time. I need to go and read or study harder and figure out how to do it. So, what's going on with the Scotch Malt Whisky Society at the moment, then, Matt? It's been around for a very long time, right? And what's currently going on with the society? How's it growing? How's it changing shape at the moment?
Where do I start? I mean, we've had, first of all, I mean, there's a few macro things that have happened at the society that are worth remarking on. I sort of hinted at it before about how, 6-7 years ago, members were saying we want more sherried whiskey in our turn. And so our spirits team, I should say call them the whiskey team, have done so much to build our sherried program. We have literally spent hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of pounds on amazing sherry wood and spirit. So like new make spirits, semi-mature spirits, fully mature spirit from all over the place. Something that people often forget. One of the main differences between SMWYes and virtually every other independent bottler is that we are warehousing and maturing this stock. These are our casks, our maturation policy, our moving them around, playing around with them, and
it's a lot of stock as well, right? It's not. This is on a big scale.
I mean, it's public information, so I can say it's something like, at the moment, it's something like 18,500 casks warehoused, which is not a small amount of whiskey. So, and if we wanted to play easy mode, we'd have, 3 SKUs. We'd have a 10-year-old, an 18-year-old, and a 21-year-old or something, but we don't. We play hard mode, and as a result, we have, 30 different single casks every single month. And so, or more, and that's kind of, it's a challenge, but it just means that we've got, one of the things that people forget is that your typical independent bottler might be in a position where they're buying casks elsewhere from lists, from brokers, from anywhere they can, and then just bottling them and sending that cask or bottler, and they get bottled. We don't have that luxury. We're playing on hard mode, like I said, in a good way, that we get to actually mature and shape that whiskey from the start.
Yeah, it's like when you crack into a computer game and you go for easy mode, medium mode, difficult mode, or the real hard mode, and you're playing it on hard mode from the start, right? Which
we are, but that's kind of fun. That's kind of fun because you get to play around stylistically, flavor profiles, distillate styles, maturation techniques, doing things that most people wouldn't even conceive of. And I have to pay full credit to the whiskey team, to Kai, Ewan, Ed, and Julian on the whiskey team for really...
We love a shout out.
Oh, just pioneering it. Like those guys, like Ewan especially, he's gone from being, over the last 10 years, a good blender to an absolute masterful blender. And I use the term blender in someone that, that shapes and creates product, not in blending whiskey. But he also blends whiskey as well, because we have our Heresy range. We have our Creators collections now, which we've just launched this week. It's just that we're very, for quite a big club now, quite a big company across 30 different countries. We're actually quite agile, which is something that I always appreciate about the society compared to other places. We are very fast at listening to members and adapting. And I think that's what's most important.
If we're doing requests, more of that shimmering silk. You talked about the blending skills. I bought
2 bottles of that. I think I've bought 2 bottles of shimmering silk. I'm not even kidding.
I bought 0, and it's my biggest single regret of that 12-month period. I tried it again in a bar, and I was like, "What did you do, Duncan?" I was like, I tried it in a bar. I tried it in a bar, and I went back, and they were like, "We got it, but we're not got it to sell." And I tried it again. I was like, "Oh my god, I've really messed this up. This is incredible."
Yeah, that was
a blend, wasn't it?
Yeah, technically it was. Well, it was all from one distillery.
Was it a blend?
No, it was a single malt. No, sorry. It wasn't. It was an Irish single malt, so it wasn't a blend as we'd technically call it, but it was more than one cask. But it was it. Yeah, it was more than one cask. Most of our Heresy range, in fact, all of our Heresy range, are more than one cask. but that range in the clear glass with the colourful labels and the stories behind them.
Yeah,
those are they're often cheaper than the single casks and phenomenal whiskies. And
I think I know which distillery that was. I think it mentions it was from Dunville's, right? It actually even says it in the tasting notes on the old website. Yeah. So they actually mentioned where it was from, and it was just so dialed up. That was for me. That was a really good example of just another great release that you're not tasting anything like that.
No,
I haven't tasted anything like that, and I've been trying more and more Irish whiskey. To be fair, I haven't tasted anything like that, even close. Incredible release, and that's what I live for with these things. I think Mike too. You're living for those exceptional releases, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's exceptional, but you're also just, for me, it's always just living for those moments that, as you say, they're time traveling devices. They're these whiskies that take you back to a time or a place that make you go, what the hell is going on? Like, it's so, like, one of those sort of moments, and that for me is what whiskey is. It's just those, it's recall, it's nostalgia, it's time and place. It's like it's someone might, for me, that is the beauty of whiskey. That's the product itself. It isn't, is let's say you're sitting on the Isle of Jura with a mate.
Yeah.
And that mate goes up, pulls out a hip flask, and it's 11 a.m. And he's like, "Oh, do you want a dram?" And you're like, "Yeah, I'll go a dram." And it's like 11 a.m. on a Sunday in winter on Isle of Arran or Isle of Jura or something, and it's like, cool. And that whiskey might be a 10-year-old something that we've bottled at society, and it's just, you go, that's phenomenal, because that time and place you enjoy it. Now compare that to bickering over scores on whiskey base. See what I mean? This is my point.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. It's more about the experience.
It's not arguing with strangers online.
But I always add something to that, which is when people talk about whiskey and why should I get into whiskey, and for me personally, as I say, there's no other spirit or drink out there with a range of flavour like whiskey.
That's true.
It's in a league of its own. So if you like taste, if you like to taste different things, if you like different mouthfeels, different textures, and you like alcohol, if you can, you should try to get into whiskey, because you're going to get more out of it. Whiskey and wine, basically, they're the two with the widest sort of range, really.
It's that thing. It's like, do you want to eat the same meal every night?
I mean, definitely not. I mean, no, that's that. But you have made me think of a question on the spot. If you can only eat food from one country for the rest of your life, Matt, what is it? You die. Obviously, to make it high school, right?
Choose or die.
Choose or die.
I would probably say, because I've been a few times and I have a huge affinity for their cuisine, I'm going to have to go with Japan.
Okay, all right. I mean, no one's going to fault that. I mean, Japanese cuisine is wide-ranging and very tasty.
Very tasty. It's
something from the sea, something from the air, something from the ground. That's how they put it together, isn't it?
Chicken of the seas.
And if that fails, just deep fry it and chuck some curry sauce on, and it'll taste lovely.
Something we've gone back to British cuisine straight away.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I'd like to ask you today, in Mike's absence.
Yep.
For a start, I don't know if we've had an official cheers on the pod. We had one before, but Slanger,
thank you.
Lovely to have you on, Matt. Cheers. Do that little ting on the microphone. So, when you go to a pub, it's a bit of a shitty pub. It's not very good. And you walk in and you've had a pint and you think, I fancy a whiskey. So, I'm not talking about good pubs in Edinburgh. You're spoiled now. You're living in a place of the world where you've got great pubs. London, Edinburgh, Glasgow, these places you can find a good whiskey pub, but lots of villages and towns and cities out there
that
are brassic. There's nothing going on, right? So if you were going to help a pub, give them 3 whiskies to put behind the bar, right? What 3 whiskies would you recommend to that landlord to put behind to keep, that you would like and that you think other people would like as well?
Can they replenish them, or is it to have it is it a mythical unlimited supply of those whiskies, or?
Oh, I see. Are you saying whiskies that have disappeared off the face of the planet?
Well, I mean, if I pick something that's a bit more sort of limited in supply rather than something that's always available.
you can go for that. You don't have to pick something that's readily available. You can go with what we will assume that it's possible to get hold of it. I mean, if you say, just FYI, if you say Springbank 12 cast strength or something, then that's fair enough. But people will probably message in saying that it's very hard to get hold of. Although you do see quite a few pubs with it, with the whiskey pubs. So what would you start with?
You know what? Okay, I'd start with a blended malt. So I'd start with something like a J.G. Thompson or a Compass Box or something like that.
Yeah,
I would start with a blended malt so that they've got an appreciation for something that is, let's say 46% ABV, is nice and creamy, approachable, and for those in the area just getting into whiskey, but they get into something good. So it's not like, well, you don't need a Johnny Walker Red Label in the back bar, but you could go with a blended malt. So it's a little bit classy.
Have you tried the latest Nectarosity from Compass Box?
No, I haven't at all.
It kind of ticks that box. It's kind of creamy, fruity,
there you go.
Jaffa cakey, that type of thing.
Or J.G. Thompson.
J.G. Thompson, that's the blended. That's the sub brand owned by Artisanal Spirits. Is that right?
True. That is true. Yes, we do own that one. Full disclosure, but the J.G. Thompson Sweet is 46.5%. 700ml bottle, 39 pounds or something. So something like that, something like that on the bar, which is not too punchy, but nice, creamy, sweet, unpeated whiskey.
Yeah. But that creaminess is important, obviously, to you, right?
Yeah. I think the middle one would be, you'd have to go with something like just a really cracking core range single malt that we all know and love. Something like I'd probably go with something like it's hard though. You could go with, you know what, you could go with a bourbon there because you want a bit more wider diversity in country styles as well. So you go with the barley whiskey for the blended malt. You go with the corn whiskey for a bourbon in the middle there. Something a little bit sort of thicker and more flavoursome, like a Woodford Double Oak or
okay,
something like that.
VR46 Brian, who sometimes listens to the pod, shout out you. He's mad into Woodford Double Oak, so I'd love to hear that.
Something like that, yeah. A nice big sweet. See, I get a bit of tree sap note out of Double Oak. I get that sort of that sort of treacle tree sap thing going on the Double Oak. And then, by the way, just on an aside, one of my favourite tasting notes in any bourbon is when you get that peanut oil note.
Oh, yeah. I like the peanut oil note. Yeah, 100%.
Anyway, hard to find bourbons with that note anymore because it's very old school bourbon. Anyway, so I'd go with something like a Double Oak in the middle. On the beginning, I'd go a blended malt, and on the end, you've got to go something smoky and peaty and Isla, and something that everyone can just I know that sounds crazy, but I'd put something like maybe not crazy, just something like an Ardbeg 10.
Yeah, look, Ardbeg 10's a total winner, right? I mean,
it's 46%.
So what you're saying is
carries an age statement and is just a good drinker.
Yeah, I mean, I was at one of the local pubs and a while ago, and we were like, I was going to get a cocktail or something, and then I realised I had some single malts, and I did the Oogie Boogie when I realised I had Ardbeg Ugadale, right?
Yeah.
I was like, because I was so excited that they had I was like, couldn't believe it. I was like in the local pub. I think this is next level stuff, and I was like, do you realise what you've got here? It was priced reasonably. And they were like, oh, it's just a bottle of whiskey. I was like, yeah, great. Thanks for having this in. More of this, please. Keep it in.
We could talk for hours on this kind of thing, but one of my favourite ever moments was I flew to Tassie. I'm talking about 10 years ago now. I had a flight down to Tassie into Hobart, and I there's walking to this bar right on Salamanca Wharf. It's a fancy whiskey bar, and I think they just opened. And they had 2 bottles of Ardbeg on the back, and one of them was Ardbeg 10, and one of them was Lord of the Isles, the 25-year-old. And I went up to the bar and said, oh, how much for each of those, please? And the bartender looked at the 10-year-old and said, 10 will be $9 a dram. I said, okay, which is about 4 or 5 pounds a dram, Went, great. And then I said, and how much for the Lord of the Isles out of interest? And he looks it up, looked it up on the point of sale system and says, this one's not in the system, so same price as the 10, just $9 a dram.
Uh-huh.
So we just sat at that bar for the next
$9 a dram. I love that.
So it was like,
did you buy the bottle? Did you buy the bottle? We were talking about this recently.
Essentially,
and we said, Mike said to me, well, what do you? I said, well, as etiquette, you have to buy at least 3 drams before you offer to buy the bottle to take it home. You've got to prove that you like it. You can't just go, I'll buy it straight away, because they'll freak out. They'll be like, this is definitely priced wrong, right? You've got to sit at the bar, drink a few whiskeys. You've got to say, do you know what? I love this so much. How much the bottle's left? Could I take that home if I paid £9 a dram? Nine tons. You can't just go. I buy it. I buy it straight away. They freak out. They'll be like,
yeah, we drank a lot of that bottle at that bar. I don't think licensing permitted us to take it off the premises, unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
But, it was just one of those things where it was just insane. Sort of, I love those moments where you find a mispriced bottle or something. A bit of
it's joyous, isn't it?
Bottle shop dusties. Everyone hunts dusties. They're called. Finding those bottles that sit up the back shelves of bottle shops. Anyway, sorry. Where I've got off topic again?
You were picking 3. You were picking 3 bottles. So I think you did very well there, Matt. So you picked a JD Thompson, right?
Yep,
kind of a creamy blended malt.
Something to get people into whiskey. Yes.
And you said you go the one bourbon. You said Woodford Double Oak.
Go Woodford Double Oak. Yeah, why not?
And then you said you'd have something from Islay, and you went with Ardbeg 10, I think.
That gives you something smooth, sweet, and creamy to start people off and get people into the category, like you're talking about before. Why do people get into whiskey? It's for they need something approachable and affordable to start them off. And if it's and JG Thompson bottles are 39-ish pounds a bottle, so therefore on the bar they're going to be pretty affordable per dram. You're probably going to be talking a few pounds a glass. So, and then, something in the middle, which is nice and sweet, and everyone loves bourbon. I mean, everyone loves a good sweet bourbon. We'll talk about how much we love bourbons before.
Well, you talking about it has made me pour a drop of this B7.9 coconuts, which I think is MGP. But regardless, I bought it on the tasting. I bought it on the tasting notes. I bought it on the tasting notes. So because it says desiccated coconut, cream, chocolate, and flowering gorse to taste salted chocolate and hazelnut brownies with stemmed ginger. And I was like, I have to have that.
I must have that. Yeah, that's fair.
I must have it. That's like right up my sweet tooth lane. If I'm in a sweet tooth mood, I want something like that. I want all in on the sweet,
I've got a bottle upstairs of the Americana smoothie, the SMWYes Americana smoothie, which was the 140. I can't remember the code on it off the top of my head, but it was the single malt, American single malt, and it was spicy and sweet 7-year-old, which is, and we bottled it at natural cask strength of 67.2%. It's an absolute bruiser, but it hits the spot when you want big sweet whiskey.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
So thanks so much for doing the 3 whiskeys behind a pub or a bar.
You're welcome.
Would love to go through Pudding Island drams with you.
Cause I'm an island boy and I've been trying to make. Oh, I'm an island boy.
So I'll do a bit of a recap for yourself and for listeners. So Pudding Island drams, it's not a survival exercise. Think of it like a mini holiday, or as Gary Neville would call it, a mini retirement, because he doesn't go on holidays, Gary Neville. He goes on mini retirements now. So he's on a different planet, Gary Neville, apparently. But anyway, so you got 30 days on a desert island. So, and then what we want to know is, with the island, where is it? What does it look like? What's the temperature? All that kind of jazz. And then we're into, and in this 30 days, you're allowed one whiskey, one bottle. We're not saying necessarily just one bottle, but one type of whiskey, one exact whiskey. Maybe you have a few, maybe you have a case of it, right? Okay. And one album to listen to. We've banned mixtapes now, and certain types of country music, but go for what you feel like. And also a dessert and a pudding, right? And then who's going to pick you up on what method of transport? So, Matt, take us through your desert island. Where are you going to be for 30 days? Okay, so let's start with location. Is that what we started with? We started with location? Yeah. Okay. You know what? I'm going with Rottnest Island. Okay, where's that? So it's off the west coast of Australia. Right. Roddy. I'm going with Roddy. Roddy. I've never, so I've not really done much of Australia, so talk me through a bit through that. I figured that would be one that maybe you or your listeners wouldn't know very well. I'm going to go with Rottnest Island. It's off the west coast of Perth in Western Australia. And I mean, I wouldn't agree with the £15 pint price over there, but otherwise everything else is really nice. £15 or $15? No, £15 for a pint. Ooh. Yeah.
So it's one of those places where the captive audience will, so people will pay whatever. But in terms of location, just that hot, warm, sort of warm and coastal, just off from civilization enough to separate from it, but not too far that it doesn't take you too long to get back. So it's like a 2-hour ferry back to Perth.
So you're going to be on your own. So this island's essentially been cleared out for you, right?
That's fine, yeah.
We won't tell you where we put the people, but they're not there anymore.
We've gotten rid of those. Don't worry about those people. Don't worry about that. Back. They're not coming
this
back.
is just for you. Yeah. So it's like how big is this island? Like
it's
small, medium?
It'd take you about 2 hours to walk around it.
All right, so it's pretty small then, really.
Yeah, smallish, yeah.
Sounds perfect.
Perfect. Get a good walk in, go for a stroll around the island for 2 hours and come back.
Yeah.
That'll do me just fine.
Okay, lovely.
Yep.
And whilst you're there, where would you like to start? Do you want to start with whiskey, music, or pudding, or dessert, as we say?
Whiskey, music, or pudding? I'll start with whiskey because that's easy.
Go on.
You know what? This sounds awfully on brand, but I'm going to bring a case of 23.75.
23.75. Okay, what was that? Tell me about it.
It's called Whiskey from a Bygone Era. And it was a 27-year-old from Distillery 23, which, for those playing along at home, is an island distillery starting with Brooke and ending with Laddie.
Okay,
And it was a 27-year-old refill bourbon cask of Laddie. And that, for me, was a very special whiskey for a few reasons, because I got to feature that whiskey at Facial in 2019.
Oh, nice.
So I was hosting a tasting at Isla House in Isla with that very cask being released that day. So it was a fantastic afternoon talking about whiskey. I had a head cold at the time when I first brought it out, but the mood picked up, and I eventually could properly nose and taste it. And it was just the name is so apt for that one. It was whiskey from a bygone era. It had that quality of certain Scotch whiskies that I long for always, which is like that burnished, I call it burnished copper, that old copper tin. If you ever have the privilege of opening like a blended whiskey from like the 1930s or 1950s or something, and it gets that, and they've got that sort of almost not dusty bookshelf thing going on. They do a bit, but they've also got that sort of like SPC pineapple tin, hot steel and sugar syrup going on as well. Mm-hmm. And this whiskey had that. This whiskey had that. It had that, but it also had that lovely saltiness of old Laddie and old mechanical whiskey. It was an old mechanical whiskey. It was like a workshop from the 1950s that hasn't been. It was like an old shed from the 50s in a glass. And so that for me was one of my all-time desert island drams. So I'd take a case of that with me, please.
Mm. Well, let's hope that you snuffled away a case, because it was just 88 bottles of that bad boy. So
that's right.
Yeah. Hey, look, perk of the job, right?
I did get 2 of those bottles. I'll be honest.
2 of them.
I got 2 of those.
Oh my gosh, that's like 3% of all the bottles.
I love it. I gifted one to a very close friend of mine. But it was one of those truly phenomenal drops. As for music choice, okay, you know what? I'm going to go with. I've been listening to a lot to that new. It sounds really topical, but I've been listening a lot to that new Father John Misty album.
Okay, I've not heard it.
Oh, it's
talk us through
phenomenal.
What type of music is it?
It's not what I normally listen to, but it's like a folk rock album. And it's his name's Father John Misty. It almost sounds like it's going to be a gospel minstrel sort of album thing, but it's not gospel, but it's got gospel overtones to it, and it's
his latest album basically.
Yeah, I can't even say the name of the album. It's like Mash Mahama or something. I can't remember the name of the actual album. I was listening to it.
I think that's kind of cool. Look, you're of the moment person. I think that's and so you're like, this is what I'm listening to right now. That's what I want to keep listening to, right? It's called
stunning album.
I've not heard of it. It's called Mahashana or something, right?
Yeah,
it's all one word.
Fantastic.
Mahashana. Mahashana.
After we finish up, just crank that loud tonight, because that's going to do you a favour. That one's fantastic.
Well, we often. Well, I mean, almost always listen to the album that the guest has recommended. So I will give it a spin.
Fantastic.
I'll check it out. I mean, I listen to pretty much everything except I don't listen to much jazz. I know it's not cool to say that. You're supposed to say you love jazz, but like I don't dislike jazz. I just don't listen to much of it. But besides jazz,
smells funny. Don't worry about it.
But besides jazz, I listen to everything. Yeah. I guess that means I'm not cultured. So great album choice. It's because it's of the moment. I like that. Right.
It is. Yep.
Like that very much. Love the bottle of whiskey. Obviously, mega passionate about it. What pudding are you going to have, Matt?
I'll tell you something right now, Duncan. I am actually not much of a sweet tooth. I don't really care for desserts much. I'll be honest. I have a
You're
salt
going to bend
tooth.
the rules.
No, I won't because
You can. I mean, people have.
no. Look,
And we'll just say yes or no.
I'm going to go with one. There is one dessert that I have an absolute soft spot for, and that's banoffee pie.
So you've been on the island for 30 days. You've been smashing the case of that Brook Laddie, 27-year-old SMWYes, 27.35. Was that the one?
23.75. No, 23.75.
23.75. Right numbers, wrong order. My bad. Listening to the latest Father John Misty album. So who's going to pick you up and on what mode of transport to get you home?
Look, Kate, my partner Kate has to pick me up. Obviously, it'll be good to see her again. You have to
Cop out.
Yeah,
Love it. Love to hear it.
Yeah,
love to hear it. Cop out.
No, it's a cop out, but it's and she's going to pick me up on the Roddy ferry. It's going to be on the Rottnest ferry.
Oh, right.
It's the only way in and out, and so it's like I actually don't know if cars are even allowed on Rottnest Island. I think it's cycling and walking only. It's one of those funny places, it's just full of weird rules and weird people. But
you'd probably just be a whole bunch of people fuming with you for closing down the island when you get back. Just be like, "Oh my days, Matt!"
That's it. Get him.
You and your missus just do like protests.
Yeah.
Open Roddy up again.
We want our 15-pound pints. Come on, open it up again.
Yeah. People on the ferry going back over, going, "I've been desperate for that pint. I can't. I don't know. I've had so much money for the last 30 days. I haven't known what to do. I've bought another house."
Yeah, I bought another house because I didn't go to Roddy for a month. Oh dear.
Honest to a malt, yeah. Honest to a malt.
There's a lot of very passionate members of SMWYes, Scotch Malt Whisky Society. So I wondered if we could just run through a few questions and thoughts. I thought a nice one would be, and you've already talked about one of your favourite bottles. Do you have another bottle or two bottles which have just absolutely blown your mind? I mean, you've been with the society for 10-ish years now or something, right?
Yeah.
And you must have tried so many bottles.
Hundreds upon hundreds, yes. I mean, there's a few that stick out for me because they're more of a sort of a sentimental or personal connection to those casks. And that might be something like 29.260 sticks out.
Wow, you remember all the numbers.
Yeah, I can't forget them. They're imprinted on my brain. So 29.260 because it was called, the name on it was like Visceral, Elemental, Experiential or something was the name on it like that. I'm going to be very close. The reason why...
Yeah, you're bang on. A visceral, elemental experience. You're almost exactly on that.
Almost exactly, yeah. So that one sticks out for me because I was on the tasting panel for it. That was one of the first tasting panel casks I was on for, and that was one where we sort of, I believe in a secret, that cask was actually originally called Old Engine Oil. I don't know why the name changed, but anyway, it had a different name.
Probably because it wasn't a Le Chic, that's why.
Probably, yeah. But it was a 19-year-old festival sherry cask of Lafroig, which was just one of the most phenomenal sherry Lafroigs I've ever had. There's heaps that stick out. I mean, that have just passed by throughout the years of casks that you just go, 73.83 sticks out, which was called Anzac Biscuits and Cricket Bats.
That's a Ben Nevis, is it 78?
But it's 73.83.
Oh, 73.
So Altmore.
Okay, yeah, nice.
That was a 15-year-old refill sherry of cask of Altmore, which was bottled exclusively for the 15th anniversary of SMWS Australia. And that was a really special cask picked out for us. And then things like that and 33.119, the 10-year-old from Distillery 33 in Isla, that was, just, again, phenomenal whiskey that we had, that our cellar master picked out. And just there's all these casks throughout.
Ooh, you don't get too many of those. Too many Arbegs, do you? I mean,
no. There's
a
hen's teeth
Gumtree
these days.
bonfire barbecue on the beach, 10-year-old first fill barrel. Oof. That was just for Australia, that one.
That was an Australian exclusive. So quite a few casks like that throughout time where. Oh, actually, you know what? I'll give you one more. 147.1.
147.1. Okay, I know some of the numbers, but I don't know them all. I mean,
no. You're not supposed to know that. That's all right.
Archie Rose. Okay, some of the Aussie whiskey is really good, by the way.
Very good. But see, this is the thing. Like that one, that cask for me was really important because we bottled it in Australia, and I hand bottled and labelled and capsuled and sealed every single bottle personally because we didn't have enough. We didn't have a production facility for it, and so it was like. Thankfully, it was only 130 something bottles of that cask, so it didn't take too long. It could have taken a lot longer if it was a sherry butt or something. But it was, things like that. I've got lots of society memories that either I had a hand in building that cask or building that release, or they were important releases in the history of the whiskey landscape in Australia at the time. So. Yeah. I think that's what the ones that really stick out for me. Again, it's not so much to do with the flavour or. It is. I mean, obviously, it's always to do with the flavour, but in these cases, it's always been about the story around how they came about.
Yeah. I love it. Thanks for sharing those. I mean, I think that any club member will always have some bottles that were very special to them over time, wherever they were.
They all do. Almost every member. I get members like coming to me saying, "Oh, do you remember this one?" And they'll show me this bottle or send me a photo of one. I'll be like, "I don't," but. And it'll be something.
And they'll be like, oh, I'm so disappointed, I'm crushed now.
No, like
Matt doesn't remember my favourite ball. Oh no.
You'd be amazed actually. You'd be amazed. I do get a bit of that. But like it'd be things like it'd be some 12-year-old Glenbergie or something, and they'd be like, oh, do you remember when this one came out in 2017 or something? I'd be like, nah, sorry, I don't. We had a lot of releases that month or that year or whatever, and it's like. And he or she will say to me, oh, this was the first ever society bottle I ever got. I'm like, that's cool. That is cool. Because, I mean, I remember my first ever society bottle was a 125, which was a Glenmorangie. And, I still remember that one like it was yesterday. It was
So next time a member from the site says that to you, you go, the 12-year-old Glenbergie? Yeah. I've actually got a tattoo on my left calf. Do you want me to show you? And they'll be like, have you? You'd be like, no, I don't remember it. There was about 20 bottles that came out that month here, just in Australia alone. It's difficult, but everyone gets very passionate, don't they? I think that's the thing. Everyone gets very
passionate about the society, and I think that's great. I mean, I think it's wonderful. I mean, it's funny you mentioned that. By the way, I wanted to just quickly say I've met 3 members now who have society tattoos.
Okay.
So one bloke had the monogram on his right calf, on the back of his right calf. So the current monogram on his calf.
Yeah.
Another guy had the flavour profiles on his arm, like the colours.
Oh, right.
So he had the 12 colours on his arm tattooed. And then the third one I saw, which was the most insane one, not insane, but like just very like specific, was a guy I met in Queensland who had I think it was cask 66.72. The actual bottle was including the code and everything tattooed on his chest.
Wow.
Just that bottle. And I said,
I mean, surely there should be some sort of like, not to encourage tattoos, although it's people's own life choice, but I feel like there's probably like an SMWYes global competition there for, best tattoo. Don't just get it done for the competition, but if you happen to have had one done already, that guy might be leading, or lady, depends. Was it a guy or lady?
No, this bloke had it on his chest, and it was... Right. And I asked him, what was the purpose of getting that particular cask on your... Because it was like a 10-year-old Ardmore. It was a nice whiskey, but I was like... I said, what was the purpose of getting that on your chest? And he said, that was the last whiskey I shared with my mate before he passed away.
Oh, okay. It was a nice story. Or not a nice story, but it's a nice gesture, right? I mean, yeah, okay, yeah.
And I said, that's really nice. And he said he and him, like him and his mate, shared, most of a bottle of that 66 before, like 2 nights before he passed away or something. And so it was like one of those moments like he wanted to forever immortalize that night. And I thought that was actually, it was quite beautiful. It did freak me out a bit, but I'll never forget that. It was, one of the most, Anyway, sorry, you were getting off track again, as you were.
Well, so I mean, look, I had a couple of things written down. So one, we talked about what are the most popular categories of whiskey. So earlier you mentioned like everyone was like, oh, there's not enough sherry, and then you guys have done loads of sherry stuff. But what are the most popular categories like that people are after? We also talked a bit about oily and coastal. What are people craving more of? What are you seeing kind of like in demand? Where are the releases kind of going at the moment? I mean, there's so many, it's hard to say. It's so varied. But do you see any kind of patterns that you want to share?
I mean, beyond what we've already said, there's two that stick out to mind. One is you can never have enough Isla Peter whiskies.
Okay.
Right. That. I mean, I know it sounds obvious, but it's actually not that hard. It's not that easy to just have all what like forever availability is of 10 and 33s and 29s and whatever. Like, yeah, you want them, but like you don't always like. It's just hard.
53s to fill the gap.
Lots of 53s, but the 53s are always great, so it's no complaining.
Yeah, they are.
But it's like
they're money. They are amazing.
They're seriously good, but you can't you can never have enough peated Isla stock. So that's a demand that's never slowed up. A second one would be this creators collection we released this week is really interesting because it's very story led, and I think the next wave of whiskey has to be much more focused on the story side of why and focusing more on the why. Why would you bottle this? Rather than just saying, oh, here's a new release, and here's a new release, and here's a new release. But it's kind of like putting out these story-led creations. And I think that's something that we're seeing a trend of, not just at the Society, but elsewhere in whiskey,
But everyone is pushing the story narrative now. And one of the things about SMWS is it's always been, for me, about just incredibly wide choice and just being bold. Like, I remember everyone was going bonkers because a Sherry's Macallan was finished in a bourbon cask. Like, and everyone's going absolutely skits, right, about it. And
so good.
It's just such an SMWS thing to do. It's just like, we just try it. We'll try it. I mean, we'll give it a go, right?
There's been so many instances of that over the years at the Society, which is what I love about it as well. We've always just been really bold and really like, as bold's a good word for it, really just like willing to take some risk. And a good example of that is stuff like years ago there was a 7 dot something. It was one of our Longmorns, and it was a 30-year-old Longmorn that was 29 years in refill bourbon, and then 1 year in virgin oak. And the uproar from members like, oh, how could
1 year in virgin oak at the end?
Yeah.
Okay, I can imagine the uproar.
29, just the balls required to take a 29-year-old Longmorn that would have been like old school Speyside refill. And
what do you say to people?
Virgin wood for a year.
So what do you say to people who will say then, oh, well, obviously it wasn't very good, so they had to back it in a virgin oak or a sherry cask or whatever to do a finish on it? What do you say to that?
You say, well, okay, so let's say most of the time that's not the case. But if you do have a whiskey that's not performing very well and you use a finish or an extra maturation to improve it, the end result is it's a better whiskey. Like, it's such a silly argument. It's like, oh, finishing is just there to hide flaws and imperfections. In some cases, it is. And that's a good thing because it cleans it up. It's like people treat this like, oh well, you're hiding behind something. No, we're not. A lot of the time it's not even that. That's not even the instance. It's just like we're changing casks to change the profile of a whiskey. Most of the time, but sometimes, okay, a whiskey might not be performing how you think it will. That's the nature of single cask whiskey, and you fix it. And if the end result is you pick up a glass, stick your nose in it, and go, bloody hell, that's fantastic. Then everyone's happy. It doesn't matter how you got there. It really doesn't.
Yeah. Okay, I love they asked that because you've got really passionate about the answer, which is great. So whilst we're in that moment, whilst we're vibing, Matt, what would you say to? There's a lot of chat at the moment about prices at the moment at the Scotch Malt Whisky Society in terms of bottles, and I have my own view on it.
Okay.
But what's your thought around the pricing strategy with the society at the moment?
I mean, in which regard? I mean, we are definitely pricier than other bottlers, but we're cheaper than some others. I mean, I think I don't mind us being a little bit pricier because I truly believe in the quality of what we're doing, and I think price is reflective.
So what I was going to say is, I feel like, there's a range of independent bottlers, and Scotch Malt Whisky Society is not the cheapest and not the most expensive, right?
Look, I mean, we're always adjusting. We're always adjusting our pricing and our approach with these things, and I think that's a good thing. I mean, I think I've been in this new role now for 4 or 5 weeks, and already I've sat through 2 full-length sort of pricing review strategy meetings, and you go,
right.
Like this is because it's always front of mind to us, knowing what members want and what's worth bottling, because I mean, even just like, what was it, 2 weeks ago, we released 4 new casks and one of them was like a 13-year-old Highland Park, one was a 8-year-old, I can't remember, something else, and then a 10-year-old Ardmore. And anyway, the 4 new casks came out 2 weeks ago. They were £50 each. Cask strength, single cask stock that we've warehoused, matured and bottled exclusively for members, and you go, that's actually phenomenal value for a 700 ml cask strength, and it's some of these cask strengths are well above 100 proof, and some of them are a bit below, but it's just we always constantly reviewing that. But I mean, I truly believe that we are bottling of a quality with our tasting panel and our. You know what? I used to think that there was this perception years ago, and I remember hearing about it. That the tasting panel was, like, oh yeah, they know what they're tasting. They just approve the good stuff, and they can see what on the bottles that they're seeing, what they're tasting on the panel. The tasting panel, by the way, the main tasting panel is literally about 30 meters away from where I'm sitting right now, and that they use that sort of a sensory lab just in this building, and that is far more rigorous than I actually anticipated. Seeing it now that I'm in the machine here, it's unbelievable how much more rigorous it is. And so going through that process and understanding what we're bottling can be trusted, and that we're not going to bottle a dud. And I think that's the difference. We are happy for stuff to sit and change or sell it off and have that flexibility, and that comes at a cost. So that's the cost of running a business, is the cost of knowing those costs, of course. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, one of those differences. I mean, yes, we are going to be dearer than some, we're going to be cheaper than others, but I think overall our proposition is sound. And as you said, we've always got deals and offers coming out.
So last question for me that I can think of, and like, I live in London, so I'm close to Greville Street. Absolutely love it.
I love
a little pop along, like 3-4 in the afternoon, have a dram. Like I'll say I'll go for a business meeting. I mean, actually, and if the person doesn't turn up, at least I can have a whiskey, right? But yeah,
it's
smart.
A tax deductible whiskey. There you go.
Always thinking. So, but I also see people asking, oh, what about, am I close to venue? Am I not? And you've got the Vaults, you've got Bath Street, you've got Greville Street, and you've got some venues around the rest of the world. So what's your view on bars? Are we going to see any kind of expansion in bars? Are we going to see any kind of changes? There's some people saying that I think there's certain days which are open to the public and not just members. Is there any kind of updates you could give us around the bar situation?
Yeah, I mean, we've got our 4 venues. We've got the 2 in Edinburgh, 1 in Glasgow, and 1 in London. Yeah. And they've all got a very similar but also very different offering at the same time.
So Queen Street, Bath
Vaults,
Street,
Vaults, and Greville Street.
Have I got that right?
Yeah, you got all 4 there. Yeah.
Cool.
So Greville Street's the one you're near in London, and they've all got their own vibe and their own way of service and their own sort of local energy to what they're building, which I think is fantastic. They've all got an attention, especially huge shout out to Simone in the London venue. Who runs London venue, truly fantastic guy. The venues, much like the rest of the society, are run by people, and they're great teams. And seriously, like the teams behind the venue managers, assistant venue managers, and all the venue staff at all 4 of our venues are some of the most amazing, passionate people in whiskey you'll ever meet. And that's the best thing about our venues, is being able to go to the bar, take a seat at the bar, order a dram, order some dinner, have a chat with the team, just be like, how are we? And just like, then everyone it ends up with these most amazing nights. And every so often, one of the, or not every so often, I mean, almost every time, one of the bar staff will say something like, oh, did you know we had this on the back bar? Or we just found this bottle downstairs today, so we're putting it on the bar today. That bottle got stuck there for years, and we didn't know it was even there.
I love that.
And you're like, that's cool. Like, I mean, just literally last night, I had a dram of a Society Old Pulteney that it was like just an 11-year-old refill Old Pulteney. And it was like one of the most amazing Pulteney casks we'd ever bottled. Honestly, it was just fantastic and it tasted like the sea air of Wick in a glass. And it was like, it was one of the old label bottlings as well. And I said, where'd you find this? And they said, I was in a cupboard downstairs. It was supposed to be used for some event in 2016, and we forgot about it.
We forgot about it.
It's like, okay, cool. So things like that, where you go like these beautiful moments where you have with the staff that they recommend things and they know their whiskies and they wouldn't be at the society if they weren't passionate about whiskey. One of our members, I'm going to do a celebrity shout out just for a second.
Yeah, do it.
One of our members,
we love a celeb shout out. Go for it. Yeah.
One of our members, one of our UK members, called us on a podcast the nerdiest bunch of sort of lab coat wearing whiskey boffins running these whiskey bars, and his name's Jamie Oliver. He's one of our.
Okay.
He's a proud society member, but so it's the best way to describe it. Though it's just like we are a bunch really at our core on the inside of the society. Through those rooms where I'm sitting right now, he's mostly lab coat wearing boffins making great whiskey, and then we get to go to these venues and enjoy them. So that's all that matters.
Well, that's fantastic. I mean, it's also great to hear that Jamie Oliver's a member of the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, so shout out to Jamie Oliver.
He's indeed.
So is there anything else today, Matt, that you would like to share or talk about the Scotch Malt Whisky Society?
I mean, not in particular. I mean, I just want to say that I really appreciate being on and just having so many fantastic members across Europe and across the UK, just engaging with and talking with us about whiskey. And that's what it's all about. And that's why I'm here, is to over the last 9 years, I've brought a particular level of sort of, energy and enthusiasm around what the society is to Australia. And now my role is to bring that same level here to the EU. And I think that's the most exciting part, is just having those, those whiskey epiphany moments that people have when they, especially, like, I still get such a kick out of meeting someone who tastes like cask strength or society whiskey for the first time. And they go, and they have that moment of like, wait, what the hell? I had no idea whiskey could taste like that.
Yeah, mind blown, right? So full-bodied.
Especially like you meet people who have maybe had, Johnny Walker Black Label, and they've maybe tried Lafroig 10 and went, and that was the extent of their whiskey experience. And then you go, okay, try this, add a bit of water, play around with it, see how you go. And then they just go, wow, like it's like opening Pandora's box of whiskey. So that's for me is why I still love what I do, and why I'm so passionate about it every day, because that's what it's about.
I mean, you're super passionate. I mean, we really appreciate you coming on. Thanks very much. I've actually just poured a wee drop of salted cinnamon butter, which is a Bourbon, 16-year-old. Thank you very much for listening to the podcast. Much appreciated. If you like the podcast, please give us a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify or any other podcast platform of your choice. You can follow me, Whiskey Tip, on @WhiskeyTip. You can follow Mike on @WhiskeyWings. We wish Two Puds a speedy recovery from his fever. And you can follow Matt. Matt, what's your @?
Oh, thank you. Yes, you can. I strongly encourage you to follow me on Instagram, where I'm probably most active, which is @Wonder and Whiskey. So WONDER and Whiskey. So Wonder and Whiskey on Instagram. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Duncan, for having me on. Of course.
Oh no, that's cool. Look, if you're into if you are thinking about joining the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, this is a non-sponsored podcast. We're just fans of the society and members of it. But if you think about joining it and you're not sure, and you still got some questions, feel free to reach out to us or contact the society directly or reach another member. Thank you so much for listening today. It's bye from me and Matt. Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Hope to see you at one of our venues for a dram sometime.
Awesome. We'll see you on the next one. Thanks. Bye-bye-bye.
Bye-bye-bye.
It's fun to drink at the SMWS. It's fun to drink at the SMWS. They have all the drams for persons to enjoy. You can hang out with all the persons.